Dragonborn. Let's be honest, a lot of people like this race because of what it is in 5th edition, but they really need to be fixed, so much so that I don't even have them as a race in my homebrew world. Why do I think they need to be fixed, and how can we do that? Stay tuned. So first up, I wanted to do a quick, history lesson on the Dragonborn. I don't want to focus on this too much because I want to get really into the meat and potatoes of the video, but Dragonborn originally came about in D&D 3.5 as a race that it wasn't a race, it was a transformation that you underwent. You picked a humanoid race, orc, half-orc, human, gnome, elf, whatever, and you would undergo a rite of rebirth, which I can showcase you here because it is on an archived Wizards of the Coast website. And you would change your form to be a more draconic version of yourself, and you'd give up a lot of the racial features that you got for being whatever that race was, and you would take on the different things of being a Dragonborn, which give you different ability scores, gave you certain dragon-type bonuses, and then you would choose either Heart, which lets you get dragon senses, Heart let you get dragon breath weapon, Mind let you get dragon senses, and Wings gave you draconic wings. In 4th edition, Wizards of the Coast came to the realization that we have dragons in the name of our game. It probably would be cool if people could play a dragon outright, a dragon-type character outright, rather than having to buy several supplements and choose to do that. So the Dragonborn were introduced then. And that's kind of the second generation, if you will, is what we have in 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. So here we are in D&D Beyond. Here's an image of a Dragonborn. I actually hate the aesthetic of the Dragonborn in 5th edition because they're all supposed to be more or less like muddy brown, orange tinted, and they kind of look more like a fish to me than a dragon, especially with all these like dreads and these like things coming off their face. I don't really like it. But let's talk about what's wrong with the Dragonborn. So, you only get 2 things, really, for being a Dragonborn. Every race gets size, movement, alignment, age, ability score improvements. You're going to get a strength of +2 and a charisma +1. But what do you get for being a Dragonborn? Resistance to a damage type based on your dragon and a breath weapon. And that's it. Other races have 5 or 6, even more than that, different features. You have 2. You choose a draconic ancestor, so if you choose a black dragon as your ancestor, you get acid damage, and you get a breath weapon. In this case, it shows what the breath weapon is here, right? It's a 5-foot by 30-foot line, and does a dex save. If you are a silver dragon, it's a 15-foot cone, and it's a constitution save, and it's cold damage. So whatever this is, you get resistance to that damage type, and then you deal a breath weapon of that damage. So it's an action to use your breath weapon. It starts off at 2d6 damage on a failed save and half as much on a successful one. It scales to 3d6 at 6th level, 4d6 at 11th level, and 5d6 at 16th level. And you don't get it back unless you finish a short or long rest. And that's pretty much it. And again, you get the resistance to it. One, I want to point out, it doesn't scale the same way as cantrips do. Now, it does do slightly more damage than a cantrip. It starts off at 2d6, rather than cantrips of similar natures would start off at 1d6. But cantrips go up at 5, 11, and 17. This goes up at 6, 11, and 16. I would argue that the lower levels would be more important, so scaling it the same as a cantrip, going up at 5, 11, and 17. So 11 stays the same. The later levels goes up by 1 level, but the lower level comes down by 1. But my point of why, and we'll compare it to some other races, and we'll look at the player's handbook races just to start. But you don't get a whole lot here, and this is usable once per short or long rest. And part of the reason that I bring this up is I've talked to a lot of people, I've played with other people, I've played in games, and I've talked to several people who tell me that they don't really use the short rest mechanic that much. The DMG factors into the way like a day's worth of encounters incorporates. You're going to have one long rest and a couple of short rests throughout the day which allows you to help balance out the way your daily encounters are supposed to go and how much combat's supposed to happen and all that stuff. But if you never use short rests in your game and you're playing a Dragonborn, then this ability just sucks. Because if you are going to be only taking a long rest, that means one of the whole things you chose your class for, you get to use it once a day, and that's it. And if you don't encounter something that's doing damage that's the same as one of the types of damage that, you are going to be, resistant to, then it really does nothing for you. So let's compare it to a couple other races, and then we'll take a look at why. So let's look at the elf. So we'll jump back up to the elf here. Elf is going to get, they're going to get a +2 dexterity from the base race, and then a +1 ability score from the sub race. But right out the gate, the base race, I would argue, is almost as powerful as the Dragonborn, if not slightly better. So you're going to get Darkvision out to 60 feet. You're going to get proficiency in the perception skill, the most useful skill in the game. You're going to get advantage on saving throws against being charmed, and magic can't put you to sleep. And you get trance, which is, depending on how people rule on it, really, really useful, or just, still moderately useful in that you only go into a semi-conscious trance state for 4 hours a day, and that gives you the benefit of 8 hours worth of sleep. Then if we look at, say, the Drow, you're going to get your increase to your charisma. Your dark vision is going to go from 60 to 120 feet. You are going to get sunlight sensitivity, so that's sort of an offset for that. But you will get dancing lights, a cantrip that you can use all the time. You will get fairy fire at 3rd level once per long rest, and darkness at 5th level once per long rest. And again, if you're in that scenario where you're not using your short rests that often, these two spells are more useful, I would say, than a one-time breath weapon. In addition, you're also going to get proficiency with rapiers, short swords, and hand crossbows, this potentially being used to offset lack of weapon proficiencies given by your class. So let's look at the high elf. You're going to get proficiency in longsword, short bow, and longbow. You're going to get cantrip, one cantrip of your choice from the wizard spell list, which uses intelligence as your ability modifier for it, which you get from being a high elf. And that's usable infinitely, which right there, you got access to a cantrip. If you choose a damaging cantrip, let's say you choose Firebolt. Firebolt does a D10, so that's, not exactly on par, but a D10 at level 1 versus 2D6 at level 1, you could, depending on how you roll, you could do pretty well with that. Also, Firebolt as an attack roll has a chance to critically hit, possibly dealing 2d10. Breath weapons will never critically hit because they're a saving throw. On top of that, it's going to scale up to 2d10 at 5th, then to 3d10 at 11, and so on. But it's also usable infinitely. It's still an action to use it, but you can use it as much as you want. It doesn't matter on short rest or long rest, unlike your Dragonborn breath weapon, which is going to be, you're stuck waiting till you can take a short rest to use it, where this wizard, or it doesn't even have to be a wizard, this fighter possibly, this rogue, whatever they are, this high elf can just be banging out those firebolts every turn, probably not have to worry about it, whereas you would go use your breath weapon and then wait till you get a chance to take a short rest, if you get to do that at all, to get it back. And then lastly, we'll look at the wood elf here. Wisdom goes up by 1, longbow, longsword, short sword, longbow, short bow. Your base movement speed is going to increase by 5 feet, and then you're going to get the ability to attempt to hide in lightly obscured nature-based things, right? Foliage, heavy rain, things like that. Now, I'm not sure how useful that is in the grand scheme of things, but 35 feet movement speed will be useful all the time, as will the weapon proficiencies, depending on what class you choose to go. So let's go ahead and take a look at Eladrin, right? This is another elven race that was added in, I think, Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes. So this is going to give you a +1 bonus to your charisma, and as a bonus action, you can teleport 30 feet once per short or long rest. So you're still going to get all of those base elven things, right? Dark vision, proficiency in perception, Fey ancestry, and trance. Then you're also going to get a teleportation that lets you teleport 30 feet as a bonus action once per short or long rest. So that's on par as far as the recharge rate of the Dragonborn's breath weapon. When you reach 3rd level, it will change based on what your type of Eladrin is. It's going to be 8 plus your proficiency bonus plus your charisma modifier. I'm going to come back to this in a second, but notice how you get a plus to your charisma modifier, and this ability is based off of your charisma modifier, just like how we saw the high elf got intelligence, and their cantrip was based off of intelligence, and the drow got charisma, and it was based off charisma. So the autumn Eladrin, you can up to 2 creatures of your choice that can you after you use it that you can see within 10 feet must make a wisdom saving throw or be charmed by you for 1 minute. The winter one is 1 creature of your choice within 5 feet of you must succeed on a wisdom saving throw or be frightened of you. Spring is you can touch 1 creature within 5 feet of you and they teleport instead. Or summer is each creature of your choice within 5 feet of you takes fire damage equal to your charisma modifier. So potentially, you could deal up to 5 fire damage, no saving throws, no rolling. You just deal that to people around you. Depending on how you teleport yourself in, that could be affecting more people than a 15-foot cone could. So that right there could be argued as good or, maybe better than the Dragonborn, although you don't get the resistance to the damage. So for that, I say let's look at the Tiefling. Tiefling is in the player's handbook. You're going to get your ability score improvements. You're going to get Darkvision out to 60 feet. You're going to get resistance to fire damage, arguably one of the most common damage types you'll ever encounter. You'll get Thaumaturgy as a cantrip. Again, not a damaging thing, but something you'll use all the time. At 3rd level, you'll get Hellish Rebuke at 2nd level, which is going to be very powerful at 3rd level, dealing 3d10 fire damage to someone that hits you. And then Darkness at 5th level. Again, you get a +2 bonus to your charisma score, and these abilities are all based on charisma. If we say look at a Levistus Tiefling, you're going to get charisma +2 and constitution +1. You're still going to get resistance to fire damage. You're going to get the Ray of Frost cantrip, which does d8s. That's usable all the time. You're going to get Armor of Agathis at 2nd level, which is a boosting your defense spell. And then again, Darkness. Again, those two are both based, Armor of Agathis and Darkness, based on once per long rest. But again, if we run into the scenario we talked about before, you may still be doing the same thing if you're not taking short rests as a Dragonborn. And then I don't want to go through everything else, but if you look through a lot of these different other races that are out there, right? Yuan-Ti Pureblood, a lot of people will agree or say that it's OP, but they're going to get immunity to a damage type in the poison type. They're going to be immune to poison, advantage on saving throws versus magical effects. They're going to get dark vision. Then they're also going to get spells on top of that. Tabaxi, you're going to get a whole bunch of different skill proficiencies. Furbolg are going to get the ability to cast several different spells and the ability to turn invisible. Aasimar are going to get healing, resistance to 2 damage types. Wings or some other thing that's going to get them boosted damage on every one attack they make every turn. The light cantrip. There's a lot of different things if we look at the Genazi also have a bunch of different options for spell casting and damage resistances. So there's a lot there. And when I say all of that, I feel like if you come back and look at the Dragonborn, it starts to really pale in comparison. One of my main issues that I want to bring up is that the Dragonborn gives you strength +2 and charisma +1, and its breath weapon is based on constitution. Every other ability and every other race we looked at, whatever they give you some sort of DC, some sort of ability, whether it's a spell or something else that uses makes the opponent make a DC, what chooses that what determines what that DC is based off of is something you get from the class, whether it be charisma based like a tiefling, you get the +2 charisma, or whether it be intelligence for the high elf or charisma for the drow, whatever the case may be, what you get the inborn ability score boost to whatever the ability is based. The Dragonborn is going to give you strength and charisma and then give you your only ability, the only thing you get that you can use as, actively is based on constitution. So I think there's 2 ways to handle this. You either change this and make it strength +2, constitution +1, potentially boosting the ability to make the Dragonborn more of a martial-based class. Now again, I don't know, and I don't want to say that all Dragonborn are going to be martial, but you get a +2 to your strength score, so chances are you may be leaning more into the strength-based martial side of things, although that's not always the case. So if you change this to strength and constitution, that boosts the the way things are working with your breath weapon. Now at least synergizes in and of with the race itself. Or you change this from constitution to charisma, and then it's or strength. But I mean either one really, strength or charisma, and then it ties into the ability scores that you get. So you're not kind of getting 2 ability scores, then you need to focus on another different ability score to be able to use the one active ability that you chose this race for. So I would also give them Darkvision to 60 feet, because so many races have it now, it's almost not even funny to not have them have it. I would do what I said, and I would scale it to the cantrip level. Again, it takes a little bit longer at level 16 or 17 to get that final D6, but how many campaigns make it that far anyway? I think it'd be more useful to get the boosted D6 at 5th level than it would be to get one a little bit sooner at 16th level. So I played in a Rise of Tiamat campaign with someone for 17 levels by the time we finally ended the campaign. And he played a Dragonborn fighter. And he was a Battle Master fighter. And outside of maybe the first encounter where we fought a bunch of kobolds that grouped up and he had a fire-based breath weapon, so he had the 15-foot cone here. So he did his fire breath weapon. Outside of maybe that first encounter or so, he never used his breath weapon again, because for him as a fighter, and again, that's not always the case, but for him as a fighter, it very quickly became clear at 5th level and beyond that he could do more damage and be more useful in combat if he made 2 attacks or 4 attacks with action surge than to spend his action doing a breath weapon that people could possibly save against, a dexterity save, which is commonly resisted, or commonly a save that enemies have, make that dex save and then take half damage when he could have attacked 2 or 4 times and possibly crit on those attacks and done a ton of damage. When you have magic weapons and things that are dealing more damage, it all just sort of very quickly seems to be outclassed. Again, if you are a spellcasting class, at certain points, it may be more prudent to just use a cantrip, depending on the distance that the enemies are, or use one of your spells. It's going to be more useful than using your breath weapon. Again, I find that early on, you may use this, and if enemies happen to find themselves in a line or grouped up and you don't have AoE, like let's say you're a paladin, for example, and you don't really have a lot of good options as a paladin for AoE. You have a lot of good things to heavily take down a single target with your smite spells and your smites. So that's good, but you don't really have a lot of options for dealing with large groups. So that's something you could consider as being a Dragonborn, and having the strength and the charisma as your ability scores, it kind of lends yourself more to being a paladin. But again, are there going to be enough scenarios where as a paladin, you are going to choose to forego making 2 attacks and possibly using your smites and other spells to deal damage, to take down a single target efficiently, to do a little bit of damage to possibly a lot of foes? I don't know. But in my experience, that hasn't really been the case. So here's how I would fix it further. Give them Darkvision. Make the breath weapon scale with cantrips, so it comes online a little bit earlier. Make it either give you plus 2 to strength, plus 1 to constitution, or make the breath weapon charisma. And I would make it a bonus action. That's how I think I would fix it. Rather than it being an action to use your breath weapon, it's a bonus action. Yes, that's very powerful early on, but I would say that makes it still useful throughout the entirety of the game. A lot of things that if you can have good access to a good bonus action, that will be beneficial to you throughout the entirety of the campaign. If you're a Dragonborn barbarian and it's after the turn that you raged, you move in, you attack twice, then you can breath weapon to deal some more damage. Breath weapon works with rage. There's no reason that should be fine. If you're a paladin, you don't really have access to good bonus action stuff anyway. Maybe you move in and you breath weapon first and then you attack twice. Maybe you can knock out some of the lower guys up front with your breath weapon as a bonus action and attack twice. If you're a ranger and you happen to be the hunter ranger, where you deal more damage to people when they're already damaged a little bit, you move in and you use your breath weapon, and then you can attack, and a whole bunch of people have lesser health on that. I mean, if you're a fighter, you don't have a ton of bonus action stuff. You have like second wind and maybe some of the things from your class, but you could attack, you could action surge, and then you could bonus action breath weapon. I think that would make things better. Making it a bonus action, it will be useful the entire time. And even if it is only once per long rest, or once per short rest or long rest, then it's still going to be impactful and useful whenever you use it, even if you don't get to take those short rests. Obviously, if you're going to play a Dragonborn, opt for the short rest if you can get your party to take it so you can get access to this ability. I do also feel like Dragonborn should have another thing, because I feel like they really get shafted on the number of features. So in my new Dragonborn, you're gonna get a breath weapon that synergizes with its own ability score improvements in some way. It's gonna get you cantrip scaling. It's gonna be a bonus action. You're still gonna have resistance to the damage type, and you're gonna have Darkvision. I feel like you should still have one more thing. Maybe that's proficiency in athletics, maybe? Because you get the strength bonus. That wouldn't be too bad, and maybe that would be good. Or proficiency in intimidation. And half-orcs get intimidation. Make it proficiency in athletics. I think that would be pretty good. They're usually pretty strong, right? They have the +2 to strength. That could work. Maybe you give them something similar. No, they don't really like dragons in 5th edition. Dragonborn aren't a huge fan of dragons. I was going to say give them, like, advantage on charisma, checks to deal with dragons, but, or something, or some sort of, like, ability that's similar to a dwarf, maybe. Like they have stone cunning, right, which is kind of like not necessarily a super useful ability, but a fun, flavorful ability. Give them something like that. Speaking of which, we didn't even talk about dwarves in the racial comparison. They get resistance to poison damage, advantage on saving throws, dark vision, weapon training. Some of them get boosted hit points. Some of them get armor proficiency. Again, Dragonborn needs some love. So I realized this video went a lot longer than I thought it was going to go, but I'm passionate about this. And I really want the Dragonborn to be better, because I feel like, in my experience, especially the more often I play with newer players, kids and new players see Dragon as an option, and they want to play it so bad. And, it doesn't come up all the time, but I do feel like when I see other people playing races that get access to certain abilities, they seem to be outclassed at the table. And, again, I do my best to sort of circumvent that. And in my games, I have given Dragonborns the ability to undergo transformations to become a half dragon, right? So that'll give them a breath weapon that recharges on a roll of a 6. I think a breath weapon that recharges on the roll of a 6 is a little too much for a racial feature, but I do think making it a bonus action might make it a little bit better. But I am curious. I think I'm going to stick with athletics as a proficiency. So that's my thoughts. I'll leave the link in the description to that Dragonborn from 3.5 if you want to just look at it. And I will write out what my thoughts are in the description as well. Someone had recently said they wanted me to compile this into a PDF. Maybe I will do that. My Fix-It series, I'll make it into a PDF and either make it available online somewhere, either on the DMs Guild, or maybe I'll just post it on the Nerd website, which I haven't updated in months, so I have to go and do that. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. Sorry I rambled so long in this video, but if you did like it, feel free to give it a thumbs up and take this chance to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Twitch is coming back strong starting next week. Also, Happy New Year. I'll see you guys next time.